is actually this opposing wall. At the moment, it is just as simple as we found out when I was taking the splashback off, soft gyprock wall. Now remember, this is a medium renovation. This is not a high budget renovation. We're keeping the floor, and I'm actually going to be keeping the skirt tile on this opposite side. But what I want to do is I want to install some hanging laundry baskets so that the family can come and sort their own, we hope, into lights, darks and colours. Now to do that on this gyprock wall would mean that it'd probably get knocked up and really look pretty bad after probably a month. So I want to install some panelling and also some tougher paint finishes on there so it will stand the test of time. And above that, as I mentioned earlier, I want to look at putting in some beautiful customized drying racks. So I'm going to put in some wallpaper that's going to bring some character, some texture and some pattern into this laundry, as well as tie in the warmer brown tones that are already in the floor. Challenges I'm going to have with this battening is I am not, as I mentioned, removing this skirt. So I only have a really small lip to play with. So I've actually had pre-cut from my local hardware supplier some really thin timber battens. And I'm going to install these on top. So they're not going to look like the original sort of paneling that you'd imagine, but they're a great tweak. So I can still get the effect, I can still get the durability without having to risk replastering this whole wall and damaging my floor. So I've spaced these out. First I did it visually, because let's face it, they need to look good, and then I've measured it out to make sure that they're an equal distance apart. I'm actually going to be sitting that on top of the tile skirt, making sure that it is absolutely vertical, and then tacking it on with some really small nails. I'll then countersink them, putty them, paint them, and we're ready to go. Now the height that I've used to choose this is actually all about functionality, all about the height that I want the top rail to be, and hence where I want the laundry baskets to hang from. I didn't want them too low because then they would hang on the floor. This is a wet area and I certainly don't want wet bags of clothes hanging from the wall and touching the floor. So I've done them high enough that once they're hung on their hooks, they'll have good floor clearance, so it doesn't matter what happens in this room, they will stay dry.
I could be trying to put these on and make sure that they are perfectly vertical by eye, but instead I have the trusty spirit level in hand. Although I am fastening these on with tiny little nail tacks, let's face it, they are not going to keep these panels on the walls. So I am using one of my all-time favorites. I'm using some liquid nails or some no more nails, whatever you'd like, putting a really generous coat on the back of each and every panel, and then securing it until it dries with those little nails. It is as simple then as press repeat. Now that the verticals of the panels are in place, I'm actually going to leave the top rail off and I'm going to start to wallpaper. What this will allow me to do is to wallpaper down behind that top rail, meaning the finish will be beautiful. The next thing is I need to measure the drop that the wallpaper will be covering. The first piece is always the easiest piece if you ask me. I'm simply measuring my drop, making sure that I have a little bit of extra just in case, because I am a measure twice, cut once girl. The first step I need to do is make sure that I have the right equipment. To wallpaper, I am always looking to use a cutting mat, a really long metal ruler, so I like a meter, and a very sharp Stanley knife. There are many different ways that wallpapers get stuck to a wall. Usually you do need to follow your manufacturer's instructions. In this case, they have asked that I use a wallpaper glue. I apply it to the back of the wallpaper using a cross-hatched pattern, and then I fold it onto itself for 5 minutes to allow it to become tacky. After this time, it is as simple as getting that on the wall, making sure that I am nice and straight, because a small error in laying down the first roll can mean to a really big error at the other end. Most wallpapers will come with a repeat distance. So this is the distance that the wallpaper pattern actually repeats. So I've laid the two first pieces now, part 1 and part 2. I actually need to measure down the repeat distance before I measure my next drop. And this will mean that the pattern will be nice and even across the entire wall. When I'm applying the wallpaper to the wall, I like to actually have a baby wipe in my hand. My hands could be really mucky and really grimy, and that's the last thing I want all over my beautiful new wallpaper. So I do like to use baby wipes or wet ones in my hands as I'm smoothing the wallpaper over to make sure that I'm not transferring any muck and grime from the Reno site to the amazing paper. I am so thrilled with how this is coming along, and now I'm approaching the really tricky part where I have a small bit at the end left over. So I need to not only cut my paper horizontally, I'm going to have to make a thinner strip of wallpaper and make a vertical cut.
Now that that beautiful wallpaper is in place, I'm going to get really busy fixing off that top batten on the DIY paneling.
You'll see whenever I'm pressing on these battens to make this paneling, I have a rag in hand. As you're pushing and making sure that you've got great adhesion to the wall, you may find that the liquid nails or the nails no more actually oozes out the side.
I'm absolutely loving how this has come up, but to make it look less DIY and more polished, I now need to make some adjustments. So I'm going to be hole punching down each of these nails with a nail punch, puttying over the top so it's not kind of spotted with nail heads, and I'm also going to gap any little gaps that might be between the wall and the batten or each of the battens, so it gives us that really seamless finished look. In a place that you intend to paint over, make sure you use the right gapping product. It's not your standard silicone that you would use in your bathroom or on a splashback. It's actually an acrylic silicone that you can paint over with most paints afterwards, so make sure you get the right one. Thanks for joining me. Did you know I wrote a book all about renovating to create wealth and freedom in your life? I've added the link below in the description for you. Enjoy.